a large population of Windows users migrated to Linux. Surprisingly, many in this population appears to have migrated to Zorin specifically.
Millions of Windows users are leaving Microsoft, not slowly, but all at once. And this isn't just a small group of tech people. This is happening at a massive scale. What's even more surprising is where they're going. They're not just upgrading. They're not switching to Mac. They're moving to Linux, specifically Zorin OS. And the reason this is happening comes down to one decision Microsoft made that completely backfired. In this video, you're going to see exactly what happened, why people are leaving, and why this could be the beginning of something much bigger than anyone expected. Because this isn't just about software. This is about trust. Something has felt off about Windows for a while now. At first, it was small things, little changes people ignored. But over time, those small things started stacking up. And then suddenly, it didn't feel like your computer anymore. It felt like something else was in control. Now here's where things get interesting, because right when users started feeling the shift, something else appeared at the exact right moment, almost like it was waiting. But before we get there, you need to understand exactly what changed. For years, Windows had one simple advantage. It just worked. People didn't love it, but they trusted it. You could buy almost any computer, turn it on, and everything would run fine. No restrictions, no friction, and that's why people stayed. But then something changed. It started with Windows 11. At first, it looked like a normal update. New design, new features, nothing unusual. But underneath, something very different was happening. Microsoft introduced new requirements. Things like TPM 2.0, specific processors. And here's the problem. Most computers didn't have them. Not because they were broken, but because they were never designed for that. So suddenly, millions of perfectly working computers were no longer supported. Think about that. Your laptop works fine, runs everything you need, and Windows tells you, this device is not compatible. No clear explanation, no real option, just no. And that's where everything starts to shift, because now it's not about performance, it's about permission. It's not that your computer can't run Windows, it's that Microsoft won't allow it. And for a lot of people, that feels very different. At first, people tried to justify it. Maybe it's for security. Maybe it's for performance. But then a simple question came up. If my computer works, why do I need a new one? And that question didn't have a good answer, because many of those computers could run Windows 11. They just weren't allowed to, and that's when trust started to crack. Not all at once, but enough, because once people start questioning decisions, they start looking for alternatives. And that small shift is what started everything. Now imagine this. You turn on your computer one day, and you see a message. No more updates, no more security, no more support. Your device is now outdated. And just like that, you're forced into a decision. You can keep using it, but now you're exposed. Or you can buy a new one. Even if you don't need it, that's it. Those are your options. And this is where it stops feeling like a suggestion and starts feeling like pressure. Because nothing is actually wrong with your computer. It still works. It still does everything you need. But now there's a risk attached to it, a risk you didn't have before. And that changes how people think, because it's no longer about upgrading. It's about avoiding a problem. And that's a very different mindset. Now here's the part most people didn't realize right away. This wasn't an accident. This system was designed to move people forward, to push them into upgrading, to make staying uncomfortable. And once people start feeling pushed, they react. Some upgrade, but others start looking for a way out. And that's exactly where things begin to shift. And it didn't stop there, because the hardware restrictions were just the beginning. After that, things started to feel even more uncomfortable. Microsoft began adding more features, but not the kind people were asking for. More tracking, more background processes, more things running that you didn't fully control. And then came something that really changed how people saw Windows. Ads. Inside the operating system. Not on a website, not in a free app. Inside your own computer. In the Start menu. In the File Explorer. In places that used to feel clean. And that's when it started to feel different. Because now, it wasn't just your device anymore. It felt like a platform. Something that was being used while you were using it, and for a lot of people, that crossed a line. Now add to that AI features being pushed into the system. Tools that not everyone asked for, running in the background, integrated into the experience. For some people, that was exciting, but for others, it felt forced. Like the system was changing faster than they wanted. And this is where frustration turns into something deeper. Because it's not just about features anymore. It's about direction. People start asking, who is this actually for? And when that question comes up, it usually means something is wrong because the experience is no longer aligned with the user. And once that happens, people don't just complain. They start looking elsewhere. At this point, it wasn't just frustration anymore. It was something deeper. Because when you combine everything, the restrictions, the pressure, the unwanted changes, it starts to feel like too much. Users weren't just dealing with one problem, they were dealing with a pattern. Upgrade your hardware, accept more tracking, adapt to features you didn't ask for, or pay to keep what you already have. And when all of that stacks together, it creates a breaking point. Because people can tolerate change, but they don't like being forced. And that's the key difference. This didn't feel like progress. It felt like pressure. Now here's where things shift. Because when people feel stuck, they start looking for options. Not because they want to leave, but because they want control back. And at first, most people don't act on it. They just think about it. They start asking questions. Is there something else? Is there a better option? And once that question exists, everything changes. Because now the user is no longer passive. Now they're searching. And when millions of people start searching at the same time, something bigger begins to happen. A shift. And that shift is what opened the door for everything that came next. And right at that exact moment, when millions of users were feeling stuck, something happened that changed everything. The same day Windows 10 support officially ended, Zorin OS 18 launched. The timing couldn't have been better. Microsoft closed the door, and Zorin opened one. Now think about that from the user's perspective. You wake up, your computer is suddenly unsupported, you're being told it's time to move on, and right there, almost instantly, you see an alternative, a system that works, a system that doesn't reject your hardware, a system that doesn't force you into anything. That's not just good timing, that's positioning. Because Zorin didn't need to convince people to leave Windows. That decision was already happening. All it had to do was be visible at the right moment, and that's exactly what it did. Now here's the interesting part. Most people weren't looking for Linux. They weren't planning to switch systems. They just wanted a solution. Something simple. Something that worked. And suddenly, Zorin was right there. And when frustration meets opportunity, people take action. That's when downloads started increasing. That's when curiosity turned into movement. And that moment is what triggered everything that came next. And this is where things stopped being a theory and became something real. Because once people saw that alternative, they didn't just think about it, they acted. In less than 3 months, Zorin OS passed 2 million downloads. Not in years, not slowly, in months. And here's what makes this even more important. Most of those users came from Windows. These weren't Linux experts. These weren't developers. These were normal people who just wanted their computer to work. And instead of upgrading, they left. Think about that for a second. Millions of users choosing to switch operating systems. That's not a small change. That's a shift. Because switching your operating system is not something people do casually. It takes effort. It takes uncertainty. And yet, they still did it, which tells you something very important. The frustration wasn't small. It was strong enough to make people change their habits. And once that starts happening at scale, it creates momentum, because now it's not just individuals switching, it's a movement. People start talking about it, sharing it, recommending it, and suddenly more people become aware. More people get curious. More people try it. And that's how something small starts growing very fast. But this leads to the most important question of all. Out of all the options available, why did so many people choose Zorin? The answer is actually very simple. Zorin removed fear. Because when people think about switching systems, they don't think about features. They think about confusion. They think about getting lost. They think about not knowing what to do. Zorin solved that immediately. It looks familiar. The layout makes sense. The experience feels natural. You don't feel like you're learning something new. You feel like you already know it, and that single detail changes everything. But here's where it gets interesting. Zorin doesn't just copy Windows, it improves on the experience. Cleaner design, smoother performance, more control. Everything feels intentional. And most importantly, it removes everything people didn't like. No ads, no forced accounts, no background tracking, no features being pushed on you. It's simple. And that simplicity is powerful. Because what people are really reacting to is control. With Windows, it started to feel like you were losing control of your own machine. Updates happen when they want. Features get added without asking. Settings get changed over time. With Zorin, that control comes back. You decide what happens. You decide when things change. You decide how your computer works. And once people experience that again, it's very hard to go back. For years, Linux had one big problem. People believed it was too complicated, too technical, too difficult for normal users. And that belief stayed for a long time. But Zorin changed that. Installing it is simple. Using it is simple. Managing it is simple. No coding, no confusion, no barriers. And when that myth disappears, suddenly millions of people become open to trying it. Then comes the part most people don't expect: performance. Because at this point, most users are not switching for speed. They're switching to escape frustration. But once they install Zorin, they notice something immediately. Everything feels faster. Apps open quicker. The system responds instantly. There's no lag in simple tasks. And for many people, that's surprising. Because they're using the same computer, same hardware, same files, same everything. But the experience feels completely different. Now here's why that matters. Windows over time became heavier. More background processes, more services running, more things using resources without you noticing. Zorin is different. It runs lighter. It uses less RAM. It doesn't have unnecessary things running in the background. So your computer can actually focus on what you're doing. And that difference is not small, especially on older machines. Computers that felt slow, computers that felt outdated, suddenly feel usable again, sometimes even fast. And for a lot of people, that changes how they see their device. Because instead of thinking, I need a new computer, they realize, my computer was never the problem. And that realization is powerful, because once people see that their machine still has life, the idea of switching back becomes much harder. Now, it's important to be real here. Zorin is not perfect. Gaming is still better on Windows in many cases. Some very new hardware might take time to fully work, and there is a paid version that some people debate about, but here's the key difference. Zorin doesn't hide its limitations. And that honesty builds credibility because people don't expect perfection. They expect transparency. Now zoom out for a second, because this isn't just about one operating system. If even a small percentage of Windows users switch, the entire industry starts to shift. Developers begin supporting Linux more. Hardware companies adapt. More tools become available. And what starts as a small movement turns into a real change. And all of this started because users felt pushed too far. This is the real story. Microsoft forced upgrades people didn't need. They restricted hardware that still worked. They added features people didn't ask for. They changed the experience without permission. And over time, that broke trust. Zorin didn't steal users. Microsoft gave them away. And once people realize they have alternatives, they start exploring. And once they explore, they don't always come back. But here's the part most people are missing. This might just be the beginning, because if Linux keeps growing and more people realize how simple it has become, Windows might stop being the default choice. And that changes everything, because in the next video, we're going to break down what happens when Linux actually goes mainstream and why that could completely reshape the future of computing.